What's a bottom feeder like you doing in my place? My own son called me a parasite on Christmas Eve, standing in my mountain lodge with his wife's family, who believed every lie he'd told them. They thought I was just some crazy old man disrupting their perfect holiday. But as I watched my boy pretend to own the home I'd built with my own hands, I knew one phone call would turn his face pale with terror. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end to see what that one phone call did to my son. Christmas Eve couldn't have come at a better time. After the worst year of my career, 3 major real estate deals collapsed clients, threatening lawsuits left and right. I needed this. Just me, my mountain lodge, and complete silence for the next 4 days. The familiar winding road up to Blue Ridge Mountains always worked like medicine for my soul. Every turn brought back memories of building this place with my late wife, Sarah, 15 years ago. She'd called it our sanctuary, and after losing her to cancer 3 years back, it had become mine alone. This lodge represented everything we dreamed of, a place where the world couldn't reach us, where business stress melted away like snow in spring sunshine. Every log, every stone had been chosen with love. It was supposed to be my guarantee of peace. That guarantee shattered the moment my headlights hit the driveway. 2 strange vehicles sat where only my truck belonged, a white Honda Pilot and a silver sedan I'd never seen. Through my lodge windows, warm light spilled out into the December darkness, and even from my car I could hear what made my blood run cold party music and laughter. Someone was having a celebration in my house. I sat in the driver's seat, engine off, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The spare key lockbox by the front door hung open. Only one person had that emergency code, someone I trusted completely. Now that trust felt like a knife in my chest. The heavy oak door stood slightly open, warm air escaping into the winter night. The smell hit me as I approached expensive wine food, and something worse, the scent of strangers treating my private space like their personal party venue. I pushed the door wide and stepped inside. 7 people I'd never seen before had taken over my living room. Empty champagne bottles covered my coffee table. Someone had rearranged my furniture to accommodate their celebration. But what really made my jaw clench was the sight above the fireplace. My favorite photo of Sarah and me had been shoved aside to make room for someone else's decorations. These weren't just intruders. They were people who'd made themselves completely at home. The group was mixed older couple in their 60s, younger woman about 30, and a few others scattered around my leather furniture like they owned the place. They were deep in animated conversation, glasses raised in some kind of toast, completely oblivious to my presence. That's when I spotted him, standing near my stone fireplace, holding what looked like my 20-year-old bourbon, the bottle Sarah gave me for our last anniversary. A young man in his early 30s suddenly went rigid. His laugh died mid-sound as our eyes locked across the room. The recognition was instant and devastating. For a moment that felt like an hour neither of us moved. The party continued around us, but everything else faded into background noise. This wasn't some random break-in. This wasn't strangers who'd somehow gotten lucky with my security code. The man standing in my living room, drinking my bourbon, treating my sanctuary like his personal playground, wasn't a stranger at all. And judging by the look of pure panic that flashed across his face, he knew exactly who I was, too. The shock of recognition hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Preston, my son, standing in my living room after nearly 2 years of radio silence, holding my bourbon like he owned the place. I'd stopped trying to reach him 18 months ago after dozens of unanswered calls and texts that disappeared into the void. The last time we'd spoken, he'd hung up on me during an argument about his mounting credit card debt. Since then, nothing. No birthday calls, no holiday messages, not even a response when I'd texted about Sarah's anniversary. Now here he was in my sanctuary looking at me like I was the problem. The seconds stretched between us like a taut wire ready to snap. Then something shifted in his expression. The initial panic I'd glimpsed morphed into calculation, and calculation hardened into something ugly and deliberate. "What's a bottom feeder like you doing in my place?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually staggered backward, my hand instinctively reaching for the doorframe to steady myself. In all our fights, all our disagreements over the years, Preston had never spoken to me with such venom, such calculated cruelty. The fact that he was doing it now in front of strangers made it feel like my chest was being crushed in a vice. The party atmosphere died instantly. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips, and all eyes turned toward us like we were actors who'd just stepped onto a stage neither of us had asked for. The young woman I'd noticed earlier, petite, dark-haired, probably in her late 20s, immediately moved to Preston's side. Her body language screamed protection mode as she placed herself slightly in front of him. "Preston, what's going on? Who is this man?" The casual way she asked the question, as if I were truly a stranger, made my stomach drop. How long had Preston been lying to these people about his family, about me? The older couple exchanged worried glances. The man, distinguished looking with graying temples, leaned forward in his chair. The woman beside him, elegant in that effortless way some people carried themselves, touched her husband's arm with obvious concern. "I have no idea who this crazy old man is." Preston continued, his voice gaining strength as he played to his audience. "Someone must have given him the wrong address. Sir, you need to leave before I call security." Crazy old man. My own son was calling me a crazy old man in front of strangers, denying my very existence like I was some delusional vagrant who'd wandered in from the cold. "Preston." I managed fighting to keep my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. "What are you doing here? How did you even—" His eyes flashed with something that might have been fear, quickly masked by renewed aggression. "I don't know how you know my name, but that doesn't give you the right to break into my house." My house. The words echoed in my head like a cruel joke. This was my sanctuary, my refuge, my memorial to Sarah. Every stone in that fireplace, every beam in the ceiling, every carefully chosen piece of furniture represented years of planning and love and hope. "Your house." The question came out as barely a whisper. "That's right." Preston's voice grew louder, more confident as he fed off the supportive presence of his companions. "This is family property, and you're trespassing. I suggest you leave before things get unpleasant." The dark-haired woman nodded emphatically. "Preston's right. We should call the police." The older man, who'd been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. His accent carried a slight Hispanic lilt. "Preston, wait a moment." He gestured toward me with obvious confusion. "How does this man know the security code? You said only family had access to this place." Miguel's question hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. I watched Preston's face, saw the flicker of panic return before he could suppress it. "He must have been watching the house," Preston stammered. "These mountain areas have problems with people like him." But Miguel wasn't satisfied. "The alarm was armed when we arrived. You disarmed it yourself. How could he possibly know the code?" Miguel's question seemed to drain all confidence from Preston's face. I watched him scramble for an explanation that made sense. "He's been stalking me," Preston said, his voice pitched higher than before. "These mountain areas attract crazy people. He probably watched me enter the code from a distance." Even Preston seemed to realize how ridiculous that sounded. Miguel's eyebrows rose skeptically. Memorizing the 6-digit code from across a dark driveway was impossible, and everyone knew it. But Preston wasn't finished digging deeper. "This is my family's mountain property. I inherited it from my grandfather 2 years ago." Elna, the elegant older woman, tilted her head with confusion. "Preston, you've never mentioned a grandfather or any inheritance." I watched doubt creep across their faces. These people clearly cared about Preston, but they were starting to see the cracks in his story. Carmen looked torn between loyalty and growing suspicion. "Preston wouldn't lie about something this important," she said, but her voice wavered. "Would you—" Preston's face flushed red. "Why would I lie about my own property? This crazy old man is obviously trying to scam us." That was enough. I'd listened to my son call me a bottom feeder, a crazy old man, and now a scammer. The hurt was sharp, but determination was taking over. I stepped forward, my voice calm despite the storm in my chest. "I'm his father." The words hit like stones dropped in still water, sending shockwaves through the group. "This is my house," I continued. "I built it 15 years ago with my late wife Sarah. Every beam, every stone was chosen by us." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Miguel's eyes darted between Preston and me, searching for family resemblance. Carlos, who'd been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. "Wait," Carlos said slowly, realization dawning in his voice. "Lawson is your last name too, isn't it?" The observation struck like lightning. I could see the pieces clicking together, the shared surname, the alarm code knowledge, the familiarity with the house that Preston couldn't explain. Carmen's face went pale. "Preston," she whispered, "is this man really your father?" Preston's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. His confident performance was collapsing like a house of cards. "No," he finally managed, but the denial sounded hollow. "I don't know what kind of sick game this is." "Preston." Miguel's voice cut through the desperate babbling with quiet authority. If this man is lying, calling the police should clear everything up quickly. Carmen was already reaching for her phone movements, sharp with anger and confusion. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm calling the police right now. As she lifted the device to her ear, I caught Preston's expression. The mask had finally fallen away completely, leaving behind something I recognized from his childhood, the look of a boy caught in a lie so big he couldn't find his way out. The familiar ringtone filled the silence as Carmen waited for someone to answer. Preston stood frozen, probably realizing that in about 10 minutes, every lie he'd told these people would be exposed by official documentation. His grandfather's inheritance, his ownership of the property, maybe even bigger lies I didn't know about yet. The truth was coming whether he was ready or not. Red and blue lights sliced through the darkness, followed by 3 sharp knocks that made everyone freeze. 2 officers entered with practiced efficiency. The older one, stocky with graying hair, surveyed the scene with sharp eyes. His younger partner positioned herself where she could see everyone clearly. "We received a call about a break-in," the older officer said. "What's the situation?" Carmen stepped forward, pointing at me. "This man broke into our house. He's been harassing my husband and making crazy claims about owning this property." Preston nodded vigorously. "He's some deranged stranger who's been stalking me, officer. I've never seen him before in my life." The casual denial from my own son felt like a knife twist, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm Scott Lawson. This is my property." The officer's eyes moved between Preston and me, noting our shared last name. "Can you prove that Mr. Lawson—" "I have documentation in my car. I just came from my attorney's office this afternoon. We were updating estate papers. The folder is in my briefcase." The female officer nodded. "Let's take a look." The walk to my truck felt endless. Behind me, Preston's voice grew more desperate as he tried convincing the officers I was some elaborate con artist. But I knew what was in that folder, 15 years of legal documentation that would end this charade. I returned with the manila folder containing my most important papers. The older officer spread the contents across my coffee table under his flashlight beam. Property deed, tax records, insurance policies, building permits, even the final inspection certificate from when Sarah and I finished the lodge. He examined each document carefully, his flashlight moving across official seals and signatures. The room held its breath as he worked. These documents clearly show Scott Lawson as legal owner since 2009, he announced, looking up. His gaze shifted to Preston with new interest. "Son, why did you claim ownership of property that doesn't belong to you?" The color drained from the Thompson family's faces. Elena's hand covered her mouth. Miguel's expression shifted from confusion to anger. Carlos stared at Preston like seeing him for the first time. Carmen stepped back from Preston, her protective stance dissolving. "Preston, you told us this was your grandfather's place." "I can explain," Preston started, but his voice cracked under the weight of colliding lies. "Making false claims about property ownership is serious," the female officer said sternly, "especially when involving false reports to law enforcement." The older officer closed the folder and handed it back with respectful acknowledgement. "Mr. Lawson, I apologize for the confusion. Your documentation is clearly in order." He turned to survey the group who'd been treating my home like their personal party venue. "The question now is what you want to do about this situation." His eyes met mine directly. The officer was asking if I wanted these people, including my own son, removed from my property. After 18 months of silence, after being called a bottom feeder and crazy old man in my own home, after watching Preston lie to people who clearly cared about him, the decision should have been easy. But looking at my son's face, seeing the boy I'd raised somewhere behind the mask of lies and desperation, made it feel like the hardest choice I'd ever have to make. Every pair of eyes in the room fixed on me as the officer's question hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. The weight of that moment pressed down on my shoulders. 32 years of fatherhood, 3 years of widowhood, and 18 months of silence, all converging into this single choice. I looked at Preston. Really looked at him, trying to find traces of the little boy who used to build blanket forts in this very room when we'd first finished construction. The boy who'd helped me plant the oak saplings that now towered outside these windows. The boy I'd promised Sarah I'd always protect no matter what. "I'll always take care of him," I'd whispered to her during those final days when cancer was stealing her piece by piece. "He'll never be alone as long as I'm alive." Now that promise felt like chains around my chest. Elena Thompson stepped forward, her elegant composure cracking with obvious distress. "Mr. Lawson, please, we had no idea. We're so terribly sorry for this intrusion." Miguel nodded emphatically beside his wife. "We would never have come here if we'd known the truth. Preston told us this was his family's property, inherited from his grandfather. We were even planning to help him financially." Elena added, her voice thick with embarrassment. "A $25,000 investment in his new business venture." The words hit me like a physical blow. $25,000. These good people, because I could see in their faces that they were genuinely good people, had been prepared to hand over their life savings to my son based on his lies. The scope of Preston's deception was even worse than I'd imagined. Carmen, who'd been standing frozen since the officer's verification, suddenly found her voice. "Preston told me his father abandoned him when he was a child." She said, her words barely above a whisper. "He said you walked out and never looked back." The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could have. Not only had Preston denied my existence tonight, but he'd been systematically erasing me from his life story for months, maybe years. To these people who clearly cared about him, I wasn't just absent, I was the villain in a sob story designed to win sympathy and support. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "You called me a bottom feeder in my own home on Christmas Eve." Preston flinched as if I'd slapped him. "Dad, please, I can explain." The question escaped before I could stop it. "Can you explain why you told your wife that I abandoned you? Can you explain why you were planning to take $25,000 from her parents based on lies? Can you explain why you're in my house drinking my bourbon, moving my wife's photographs, treating my sanctuary like your personal playground?" The officers shifted slightly clearly, recognizing this as a family crisis that went far deeper than simple trespassing. "Oh yeah, I've been enabling this behavior for years," I said, the realization hitting me like cold water. Every time I'd bailed him out of trouble, every time I'd covered his debts, every time I'd made excuses for his failures, I hadn't been helping him. I'd been creating the man who could stand in my living room and call me a parasite without blinking. Sarah hadn't asked me to enable his lies. She'd asked me to take care of him to help him become the man she knew he could be. Instead, I'd turned him into someone who could scam innocent people and deny his own father's existence. The boy I'd raised was still in there somewhere, but he was buried under years of my own misguided protection. My hand moved to my jacket pocket, fingers closing around the familiar weight of my smartphone. The officer was still waiting for my answer, but I realized the question wasn't just about removing these people from my property. It was about whether I was finally ready to stop enabling the man my son had become. I pulled the smartphone from my pocket, its blue glow casting shadows across my determined face. The banking app opened with a familiar chime that seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. "Let me show everyone what I've really been paying for." I held the screen where everyone could see months of automated payments. "The luxury apartment you live in Preston, $2,800 monthly. I pay that." Carmen gasped audibly. I scrolled through more transactions, each one proof of deception. "Car payments for that BMW outside $847 monthly. Also mine." I turned the phone toward the Thompson family, letting them see the evidence. Miguel's face went ashen. Elena covered her mouth with trembling fingers. "Health insurance, auto insurance, renter's insurance." I continued methodically. "All under my policies, all paid by me." Preston's voice cracked. "Dad, please, not in front of them. 3 credit cards in your name. Current balance $12,000. Guess who makes the payments?" Carmen stared at Preston betrayal written across her face. "You told me your salary covered our lifestyle." The lies unraveled faster than Preston could spin new ones. I watched him search for explanations that didn't exist. Monthly allowance of $1,500. Phone service, internet utilities, everything you need to maintain the illusion of independence. The officer stepped closer, recognizing this went far beyond property disputes. "The total I've given you annually exceeds $78,400. I said, letting the number hang in the air. "For 6 straight years." Elena made a sound like she'd been punched. That was more than many families earned yearly, and I'd been handing it to my son like pocket change. My finger moved to cancellation options, each tap deliberate and final. "Apartment subsidy cancellation initiated. These terminations take effect within 48 hours. The electronic confirmation chime echoed like a death knell. "Car loan payments canceled." Chime. "Credit card autopay canceled." Chime. "Insurance policies coverage terminated." Chime. Preston's face went paper white. "Dad, you can't do this. How am I supposed to—" "Phone service canceled." Chime. With each confirmation, weight lifted from my chest. The constant worry about Preston's next crisis, the endless cycle of bailouts and broken promises finally ending. I closed the app and pocketed the phone. Every face stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to something that might have been respect. That ends tonight. The silence stretched before I delivered the words that would change everything. Pack your belongings and leave my property. All of you. Now. The finality in my voice surprised even me. After 6 years of financial enabling, after 18 months of silence, after being called a bottom feeder in my own home, I was finally drawing an uncrossable line. Preston's mouth opened to protest, but no words came. The confident mask had cracked completely, leaving only the face of a man who just realized his safety net had vanished forever. The Thompson family stood frozen, probably calculating how close they'd come to losing $25,000 to my son's elaborate deception. Carmen looked between Preston and me, understanding dawning that everything about their relationship had been built on lies. The officer nodded slightly, recognizing that justice sometimes came in forms that had nothing to do with handcuffs or court dates. The sound of luggage zippers and rustling coats filled the silence like the aftermath of a funeral. Nobody spoke as reality settled over the room like ash. The Thompson family moved with desperate efficiency. Elena folded clothes with sharp movements, barely containing her anger and humiliation. Miguel gathered belongings, avoiding eye contact with Preston. "Thank God we didn't give him that money yet," Miguel whispered to his wife, relief thick in his voice. Carmen threw items into her bag with violent efficiency, each movement punctuated by glances at Preston that could cut glass. Her protective stance had evaporated, replaced by pure fury. Carlos packed in silence, his face carrying the expression of someone who just learned everything they knew about a person was a lie. "Dad, please," Preston's voice cracked as he approached me. "Can we just talk privately? I can explain everything." I looked at him and saw flashes of the little boy who used to help me stack firewood for this fireplace. But that boy was buried under 6 years of lies and financial dependency I'd enabled. "There's nothing left to discuss," I said with surprising finality. The officers positioned themselves strategically, ensuring orderly departure despite the emotional undercurrents threatening to explode. Elena nodded stiffly when asked if they had everything. Miguel shouldered their suitcase. Carmen zipped her bag like tearing fabric and slung it over her shoulder without looking at Preston. They filed toward the door in a procession both rushed and reluctant. Preston lingered, making one final desperate attempt. "Dad, I know I messed up, but we're family. You can't just—" "You made your choice when you called me a bottom feeder in my own home on Christmas Eve." Preston's face crumpled, but I'd already turned away. I couldn't watch the last thread connecting me to the son I'd raised finally snap. The heavy oak door closed with finality that echoed through every room. Car engines started, tires crunched on gravel, then faded into December night. Silence. I stood surrounded by party debris. Empty champagne bottles cluttered my coffee table. Someone had left half-eaten crackers on my bookshelf. Their Christmas decorations looked foreign and intrusive against familiar walls. My sanctuary had been violated, reclaimed, and now sat in the aftermath of a family explosion years in the making. I sank into my leather chair by the fireplace, the same chair where Sarah used to curl up with books on winter evenings. The silence felt different now. Not the peaceful quiet I'd come here to find, but something hollow and aching. For 32 years, I'd been Preston's father. For the last 6, I'd been his enabler. Tonight, I'd finally become something I never thought I'd have to be his consequence. The weight of that realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. I'd kept my promise to Sarah I had taken care of Preston, but somewhere along the way, taking care of him had become taking care of everything for him. I'd created a man who could call his own father a bottom feeder without flinching. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows across walls. Sarah's photograph, which I'd quietly moved back above the mantel, seemed to watch with understanding. She'd known this day would come, hadn't she? Known that love sometimes meant letting go, even when it tore your heart out. I closed my eyes and let silence wash over me. Tomorrow would bring unpredictable consequences. Preston would learn to stand on his own feet. The Thompsons would process betrayal. Carmen would decide if her marriage could survive its foundation of lies. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the strange peace that comes from finally doing what you know is right, even when it costs everything. 1 week after that Christmas Eve confrontation, my phone screen told a story of escalating desperation. 23 missed calls, all from Preston's number. The peace I'd felt that first night had lasted exactly 12 hours. Text messages started the next morning and evolved daily, each one a snapshot of his world crumbling. Day 1. Dad, please call me. Day 3. We're staying in a motel. Day 5. Carmen's family won't help us anymore. Day 7. Please, I have nowhere else to turn. I'd ignored them all, but the progression was impossible to miss. Each message carried more panic, less of the arrogance that had gotten him into this mess. On day 7, my phone rang from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Dad, please don't hang up. Preston's voice sounded hollow, defeated. We're living in my car now. The words hit like a physical blow, but I forced myself to remain silent. This was what consequences looked like when the safety net disappeared. The Thompson family cut all contact with us, he continued, voice cracking. Miguel called me a lying piece of trash, and hung up. Elena won't even answer the door when Carmen goes to their house. I could picture their faces' disappointment, anger at being played for fools by someone they'd trusted as family. Elena was furious when she found out about the fake business investment, Preston added. These are good people, Dad. They worked double shifts to save that money. Elena cleaned houses on weekends. Miguel drove Uber after his regular job, all so they could help what they thought was a legitimate opportunity. The scope of his betrayal was staggering. These weren't wealthy people who could afford to lose $25,000. They were working-class folks who'd scraped together life savings to help what they believed was their son-in-law's entrepreneurial dream. Suddenly, Carmen's voice erupted in the background, sharp with fury. Tell him how we're living in your car. Tell him how my parents won't look at me. Carmen, please, Preston started. No. Her voice grew louder as she grabbed the phone. Mr. Lawson, your son destroyed my family's trust. My parents worked themselves to exhaustion for that money. I could hear pain beneath her anger, the humiliation of explaining to her parents that their carefully saved nest egg had almost been handed over to a con artist they'd welcomed into their home. They were so proud their daughter married someone successful. Carmen continued, voice breaking, and it was all lies. Arguing erupted through the phone, Preston trying to explain, Carmen cutting him off with harsh accusations. Their voices overlapped in a crescendo of blame and recrimination. You're a pathetic liar, Carmen screamed with finality. I'm filing for divorce. I can't even look at you anymore. Car doors slammed. Engine started. Tires squealed. Silence. The line went dead, leaving me in my quiet lodge with the weight of what I'd witnessed. Preston had lost everything: his wife, her family's trust, their financial support, and now their marriage. The domino effect of my Christmas Eve decision had played out exactly as I'd known it would. I set the phone down and stared into my fireplace. The peace I'd felt a week ago seemed distant, replaced by something heavier, but no less certain. The consequences were complete and irreversible. There would be no coming back from this. 4 months later, I sat on my deck with morning coffee, watching April sunlight filter through the Blue Ridge Mountains. Spring had transformed the landscape. Dogwood blossoms dotted the hillsides like scattered snow, and the air carried the sweet scent of renewal. The lodge felt like a sanctuary again. No unexpected visitors, no financial crises, no phone calls demanding I fix someone else's problems. Just the peaceful quiet I'd originally driven up here to find on that chaotic Christmas Eve. Best decision I ever made, I murmured to myself, meaning every word. My phone rang, displaying an unknown number. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Dad, it's me. Preston's voice was different, subdued, stripped of the entitlement that had defined our last conversation. I'm calling from a friend's phone. I said nothing, waiting. I wanted to apologize for everything, he continued. I know I messed up badly. I'm working at a warehouse now, loading trucks. Carmen and I are officially divorced. The information hit me with less impact than I'd expected. 4 months of silence had created distance that felt both necessary and permanent. I'm living in a studio apartment, paying my own bills for the first time in years, Preston added. I realize now how much I took advantage of you, how much I hurt you. There was something in his voice I hadn't heard in years, genuine humility. Not the manipulative contrition he'd used when asking for money, but actual understanding of the damage he'd caused. Could we maybe start over? He asked quietly. I know I don't deserve it, but we're still family. I looked out at the mountains, considering my response carefully. Part of me, the part that remembered teaching him to ride a bike, helping with homework, cheering at his high school graduation, wanted to say yes. But a larger part, the part that had learned painful lessons about enabling, knew better. Preston. I spent 30 years making excuses for your behavior, I said calmly. I thought I was helping you, but I was actually preventing you from growing up. I know that now. You needed to learn to stand on your own feet. I continued. Every time I bailed you out, I robbed you of the chance to develop real strength, real character. The silence on his end stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. I won't be your safety net anymore, I said finally. That's not love, Preston. That's enabling, and I'm done enabling. Dad, please, the next time you're in trouble, don't call me. I said, remembering that Christmas Eve confrontation with crystal clarity. Call those police officers like you did that night. Maybe they'll have better advice. I ended the call before he could respond and immediately blocked the number. Then I deleted his contact information entirely, watching his name disappear from my phone like smoke dissipating in mountain air. The finality of that small action felt surprisingly liberating. I set the phone aside and looked out at the view that had drawn Sarah and me to this place 22 years ago. The mountains stood unchanged, indifferent to human drama, offering the kind of perspective that only comes with distance and time. Sarah would have understood this decision, I realized. She'd asked me to take care of Preston, not to cripple him with misguided protection. Real love sometimes meant letting people face their own consequences, even when it broke your heart to watch. A cardinal landed on the deck, railing its red feathers brilliant against the morning light. It cocked its head at me for a moment, then flew off toward the forest, free and unencumbered. No more bottom feeders in my life? I said aloud, the words carrying across the quiet mountain air like a promise to myself. For the first time in years, I felt completely genuinely free. Sometimes the hardest lesson God teaches us is that love doesn't mean saying yes to everything. I learned that enabling someone isn't caring for them, it's crippling them. For 30 years, I thought I was being a good father by always catching Preston when he fell. But God showed me that real love sometimes means stepping back and letting people face their own consequences. This true story changed everything I believed about family responsibility. Like many grandpa stories passed down through generations, it carries a truth that cuts deep. We can't save people from themselves. The most loving thing I ever did for my son was the hardest I stopped being his safety net. God has a way of using our deepest pain to teach our most important lessons. When Preston called me a bottom feeder in my own home, it wasn't just cruel words, it was a wake-up call I'd needed for years. True stories like this one remind us that sometimes we have to lose everything to find our freedom. The mountains taught me something, that Christmas Eve peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict, but from doing what's right even when it costs us everything. That's a lesson worth sharing, just like the grandpa stories that shaped my own understanding of tough love. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between enabling someone and truly loving them? Don't forget to